Carmine's on a Friday night never stops moving, and tonight neither will the man sitting alone in the corner booth with a glass of water he hasn't touched and eyes that have already catalogued every person in the room. But first, the moment that changed everything. Maya moves through the dinner rush the way water moves through a city, finding every gap, filling every need, never stopping long enough to be still. Dark brown skin warm under the amber lighting, natural curls pulled into a high ponytail that somehow stays perfect through the chaos. White shirt, black apron, name tags straight. She's carrying a full tray, reading a difficult table from across the room before she's even reached it. The waitress the whole floor leans on without ever saying thank you. The one who keeps Friday night from becoming a disaster no one planned for. She doesn't see him coming. Antonio, floor manager of 7 years, the kind of authority that mistakes proximity to power for power itself. He moves through the restaurant like the rules were written for everyone else. No one corrects him. No one ever has. Until his hand shoots out and wraps around her arm. The tray tilts. The room freezes. Maya's face opens into something, shock, then something quieter and far more dangerous. In the corner booth, the man in the dark suit goes completely still. His hands rest flat on the table, his jaw is set. He isn't staff, he isn't afraid, and the look in his eyes says Antonio just made the last careless mistake of his career. Who is he? Why is he still here? And what happens the moment he decides to stand up? Stay, because what comes next isn't a complaint form, it's a reckoning. Maya has worked at Carmine's for 2 years, 3 months, and 11 days. She knows this the way she knows everything about this job, precisely, quietly, without anyone asking her to keep track. She knows which tables tip well and which ones will run her back and forth for 40 minutes and leave 12%. She knows the kitchen gets backed up on Friday at 7:30 and that if you don't put your orders in early, your tables will turn hostile by 8 o'clock. She knows that the couple in booth 4 are celebrating something they haven't said out loud yet because of the way the man keeps checking his jacket pocket. She is 23 years old and she is very good at reading rooms that were never designed to notice her back. That is the thing about Maya that Carmine's never bothered to understand. Her value lived in the details, in the way she could carry 4 conversations and a full tray at the same time, in the warmth she brought to tables that were already annoyed before they sat down, in the fact that on her section complaints were rare and regulars were loyal, and nobody ever quite understood why. She understood why. She worked for it, every single shift. None of that was in the room when Antonio grabbed her arm. What was in the room was a tray full of food tilting sideways, 7 tables watching, 2 coworkers frozen mid-step, and Antonio's voice, loud enough to carry, telling her that table 9 had been waiting 22 minutes and that this was a reflection of her attitude problem. Her attitude problem. Maya set the tray down carefully, redistributed the weight, said nothing. She has learned, the way women in service learn, that saying something costs more than it returns, that the person in the apron almost never wins the argument with the person in the tie, that the machine, the scheduling machine, the performance review machine, the who gets sent home early machine, runs on the manager's mood and not on what actually happened. So she said nothing. She finished her shift. She smiled at the couple in booth 4 when the man finally pulled out the ring. Then she filed a complaint. The HR coordinator was a tired-looking woman named Sandra who typed while Maya talked and never once made eye contact. She used the word incident 4 times. She said someone would follow up within 5 to 7 business days. She slid a form across the desk that had a line for Maya's signature and very small print at the bottom that Maya read twice before signing nothing. She went home. She did not cry until she was inside with the door closed, because she had learned that, too, where to put the feeling so it didn't cost her anything else. Monday morning, her schedule for the following week was posted, 14 hours, down from 38. No explanation, no email, just the number sitting there on the board like a door quietly closing. She stood in the break room and looked at it for a long time. This is how the machine works. Not with a loud decision, with a slow, patient squeeze, with hours that disappear and explanations that never come, and the unspoken understanding that if you make noise, things get smaller and smaller, until you either go quiet or go away. Carmine's had done this before. Maya was beginning to understand that she was not the first uniform it had tried to wear down. She was still looking at the schedule when her phone rang. Unknown number.
She almost didn't answer. The number had no name attached to it, no area code she recognized, and Maya had learned recently that unexpected things arriving without warning were rarely good news. The schedule on the board was still fresh in her mind. 14 hours, 2 shifts, rent due in 2 weeks, and a savings account that had never been described as comfortable even in its better moments. She answered on the 4th ring. Ms. Naya. The voice was male, calm in a way that didn't feel performed, a slight Korean accent underneath the words, smooth and careful, like someone who had spent years in rooms where every syllable mattered. She said nothing, waited. 3 diners were seated within direct sight of what happened on Friday night. A pause, brief and deliberate. I have their statements, written and signed. Her hand tightened around the phone. I also have a name for you, an attorney, the best one for exactly this kind of situation. Maya moved to her kitchen window. Outside, the street was doing its ordinary Saturday things. A woman walking a dog, 2 kids on bikes, a city completely unbothered by the fact that her life had been quietly taken apart over the past 72 hours. Who are you? She asked. Someone who was in the restaurant Friday evening. Her mind went immediately to the corner booth, the man in the dark suit who had still been sitting there when she cleared the table beside him at the end of her shift, the one she had clocked without meaning to, the way you clock something that doesn't quite fit the room. Too still, too watchful, the kind of calm that isn't relaxed, it's controlled. What do you want? She asked, because nobody offers something in this world without a reason attached to it. The pause that followed was thoughtful, not hesitant, like he was choosing the most accurate answer rather than the easiest one. Nothing, he said, not from you. Then why? Because what happened to you was wrong, and the people moving to bury it are making a mistake. Another pause, quieter than the last. I don't like it when people make that kind of mistake. Something about the way he said it made the back of her neck prickle. Not fear exactly, more like standing near something powerful without being able to see the full shape of it. The attorney, she said carefully, if I wanted to reach her, how would I do that? Her name is Ji-Soo Park. Tell her Hanuel sent you. She'll take the meeting. Maya wrote the name down on the back of a grocery receipt because it was the only paper within reach. Ji-Soo Park. She underlined it once without deciding to. And the statements, the diners, are they willing to go on record? Just that. No elaboration, no conditions. The word landed like something solid. Maya looked at the grocery receipt, at the name, at the 14 hours on the board she could still see clearly in her mind. If I need to reach you, she said. You won't need to. I'll know when the time comes. He ended the call. Maya stood in her kitchen for a long moment. The street outside was still doing its ordinary things. The woman with the dog had turned the corner. The kids were gone. She looked at the name on the receipt again. Then she did something that surprised even her. She didn't throw it away. She typed it into the search bar that same afternoon. Hanuel. Just the one name first, the way he had said it. Single, clean, no last name offered. The results came back with nothing useful. A few transliterations, a meaning in Korean she found on a language site. One who rules the sky. She stared at that for a moment, then typed more. Hanuel, Korean businessman. Hanuel, restaurant industry. Hanuel, investor. Still nothing that felt like the man on the phone. Then she tried something different. She typed the name into a community forum she sometimes read, a local thread where people talked about the city the way people talk about a place they know too well to trust completely. She searched it like a word in a conversation she hadn't been part of. 3 results, all old, all with the same quality. Not information, absence of it. The particular silence that forms around a name when people have collectively decided not to say it out loud in writing. One post said only, "If you know who runs the East Corridor distribution network, you already know who you're dealing with." The thread had been locked after 2 replies. Maya sat back from her laptop. She thought about the corner booth, the untouched glass of water, the complete stillness while Antonio's voice filled the restaurant, and everyone else either looked away or froze. She had filed him under "leave alone" that night without knowing exactly why. Her instincts had been right. They had just been more right than she realized. She picked up the grocery receipt. Jisoo Park's office was in a building downtown that cost more per floor than Maya's entire block. The receptionist had the polished voice of someone trained to make you feel like the appointment was a privilege. Maya got a slot for the following morning and spent the night rehearsing what she would say and in what order. She didn't need to. Park was a Korean woman in her early 50s, small and sharp in the way that certain people are sharp, not aggressive, just precise. She wore her reading glasses like punctuation. She listened to Maya's full account without writing anything down, without nodding in the performed way people nod when they are waiting for their turn to speak. When Maya finished, Park was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "Tell me about the man who gave you my number." Maya told her what she knew. The phone call, the statements, the single name, the forum thread with the locked replies. Park's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes shifted, sharpened. "Do you understand who he is?" Park asked. Maya answered honestly, "I'm beginning to." Park took her glasses off, set them on the desk with the care of someone handling something valuable. "In 11 years of knowing his name," she said, "I have never once seen him move resources towards something like this, not without a reason that runs deeper than principle." She looked at Maya directly. "That is not a warning against him. It is a warning about what it means that he chose this, that he chose you." A pause. "You should walk into whatever this becomes with your eyes open." Maya held her gaze. "I already am." Park was quiet for another moment. Something moved across her face, like a door opening and closing in the same breath. Then she put her glasses back on and picked up her pen. "Good. Now let's talk about what we're going to do." For the first time in 5 days, Maya felt the tight thing in her chest loosen, just slightly, just enough. She leaned forward and listened. The offer arrived 4 days after the meeting with Park. Not through HR this time, through a lawyer, a man named Gerald Fitch, who had the kind of voice that had spent decades making uncomfortable things sound reasonable. He called Maya directly, which told her something. Park had told her what it meant when they bypassed the formal channels and came straight to you. It meant they were moving fast because they were worried. The number he quoted was real money, the kind that would cover her rent for a year, clear the small debt she didn't talk about, and give her enough left over to breathe for a while. It was generous in the specific way that settlements are generous, calibrated exactly to the point where saying no starts to feel irresponsible. Conditional on 2 things: her resignation from Carmine's and her silence, permanent and legally binding about everything that had happened inside it. Fitch used the word closure 3 times. He said it like it was something he was offering her rather than something he was buying for himself. Maya said she would think about it. She hung up and sat on her couch and looked at the wall for a long time. She almost called Park first. Then she called Bree. Her older sister picked up on the second ring, already sounding like she was in the middle of something, which she always was. Bree was a paralegal with a law degree she had earned while working 2 jobs and raising a opinion about everything, which she delivered without being asked and without apology. Maya read her the terms. Bree was quiet for 4 seconds, which for Bree was the equivalent of a long pause. They sent a private attorney, she said. Not HR, not Sandra who doesn't make eye contact. A private attorney with a number attached. Yes. 4 days after you filed? Yes. Bree made a sound that carried a full paragraph of meaning. Maya, they are scared. You don't send Gerald Fitch to someone you're not scared of. Her voice was certain in the way that facts are certain. That means you have something. That means whatever they think you can prove, they believe you can prove it. The money is real, Bree. The money is a door closing. You walk through it, it locks behind you, and every woman Antonio puts his hands on after you has no record that it ever happened before. A pause, quieter now. That's what the silence clause is really buying. Maya closed her eyes. She knew this. She had known it while Fitch was still talking. But knowing a thing and choosing the harder version of it are not the same action, and the distance between them felt very wide sitting alone in her apartment with 2 shifts a week and rent coming. She opened her eyes, picked up her phone. She didn't call Park. She texted the unknown number instead. 4 words, typed quickly before the reasonable part of her brain could negotiate her out of it. I'm not taking it. She set the phone face down on the cushion beside her, counted to 30, turned it back over. The response had already come. Good, don't. And then, 10 seconds later, a second message. Park already knows. She's been waiting for you to decide. Maya read it twice, then she read it a 3rd time, not because she didn't understand it, but because of what it meant underneath, that he had expected this, had held the space open for her to arrive at it herself, had not pushed or persuaded or made the choice feel like his. She exhaled slowly. Then she called Park. I was wondering when you'd ring, Park said, and Maya could hear the particular satisfaction in it, small and precise, like a key turning in the right lock. I'm not signing anything. No, Park agreed, you're not. Now, here is what Monday looks like. The diner 2 blocks from Carmine's opened at 6. Maya had been coming here every morning for the past week, ever since the breakfast shift at a cafe across town became the thing standing between her and a rent shortfall. Coffee before the first shift, a few quiet minutes before the day made its demands. It was the one part of her schedule that belonged entirely to her. He was already there when she walked in. Corner table, dark jacket over a plain shirt, no tie, no suit. Civilian clothes that should have made him look ordinary and somehow didn't quite manage it. The way he sat, shoulders relaxed, hands resting on the table, completely still in a room full of early morning movement, gave him away the same way it had in the corner booth. Some people carry their nature in their posture. He was one of them. He didn't stand when she entered. He just looked at her, and the look was direct without being aggressive, the way someone looks when they have been waiting and are not going to pretend otherwise. She walked over, sat down across from him without being invited, because this was her diner and her morning, and she was not going to let the strangeness of it make her small. You knew I came here, she said. Yes. How long have you known? A brief pause. A few days. She absorbed that, filed it. What's your name? Your full name. Hanuel Jang. She had already searched every version of that name she could construct. The silence around it was the same. Okay, she said. Why are you here this morning specifically? He reached into his jacket and placed his phone on the table, screen facing her. A name, a work record, a photograph of a young man she recognized immediately. Dre, one of Carmine's busboys. 19 years old, fast worker, always looked slightly exhausted in the way of someone carrying more than his job description. His name is Dre Washington, Hanuel said. 2 days ago, he was approached by someone connected to Carmine's management. He was offered a cash bonus and a promotion to floor supervisor. He said the next part carefully, in exchange for a written statement saying he didn't see Antonio touch you. The coffee in front of her went untouched. Has he accepted? Not yet, but he has a mother in assisted living and a sister in her first year of college.
Hanuel's voice didn't change tone. He was not editorializing, just building the picture precisely. He's afraid, and they chose him because of it. Maya looked at the photograph for another moment. Then she stood up. I'm going to talk to him. Hanuel went still. Not the relaxed stillness from before, the other kind, the kind that meant something was being held back deliberately. I'll come with you. That would make it worse. She picked up her coffee. He's a 19-year-old kid. He doesn't need to be in a room with you right now. He needs to hear from me. A pause. Something moved through his jaw. Then tell me how it goes. She met his eyes. Dark, steady, giving very little away on the surface and somehow communicating everything underneath it. And then what? She asked. His expression shifted, just slightly. The restraint was still there, but something honest came through it, quiet and certain. And then I handle whoever's doing the threatening. She should have found that alarming, the plainness of it, the complete absence of hesitation. She was a practical woman who understood exactly what those words meant coming from a man whose name made forum threads go silent. What she felt instead was steady, like the ground had been uncertain for 2 weeks and someone had just pressed it flat. She didn't say that. She picked up her bag. I'll text you, she said. She went to find Dre alone. Dre didn't change his statement. Maya had found him before his shift, in the parking lot behind the cafe where he picked up weekend work. She hadn't pressured him. She hadn't made promises she couldn't keep. She had just told him the truth, that what he remembered was real, that she wasn't asking him to be brave for her sake, and that the people threatening him had more to lose than he did. He had listened. He had been quiet for a long time. Then he had said, simply, that the job offer had disappeared 2 days ago. Evaporated, like it had never existed. His supervisor had looked confused when he brought it up. Maya had texted Hanuel from the parking lot. The offer disappeared. His response had come back in under a minute. I know, that was the point. She had stared at her phone for a moment and kept moving. The hearing was 3 weeks out when Park called her into the office. 2 names, 2 folders on the desk, thin but precise. The first belonged to a woman named Celeste, who had worked at Carmine's 3 years ago and now managed a cafe in Portland. The second belonged to a man named Roy, a former line cook who had left the restaurant industry entirely and was now driving trucks out of state. Both had documented incidents, complaints filed then quietly buried, performance reviews that turned hostile immediately after the filings. Both had left Carmine's within months of raising their voices. Antonio's history, it turned out, had been waiting for someone to pull the right thread. How did you find them? Maya asked. Park paused, the specific pause of someone selecting their words with care. I had research assistants. Maya closed her eyes, briefly, just for a second. She thought about the forum thread with the locked replies, about a man who could make a job offer disappear in 48 hours, about the particular architecture of support she had been receiving, always in the background, always precise, always leaving her the visible space to act while the obstacles around her quietly moved. She opened her eyes. Are they willing to testify? Celeste by video, Roy in person. Park's expression was steady. They said they had been waiting for someone to make it worth coming forward. Maya nodded. She didn't say anything else about the research assistance, and Park didn't offer it. That night she couldn't sleep. She had tried. She had turned the lights off at 10:30 and lay in the dark listening to the city outside her window doing its late-night things. Her mind kept moving through the case like a checklist, finding edges, testing weak points, running the same scenarios until they stopped making new sense. Her phone rang at 11:47. She answered before the second ring. You should sleep, Hanuel said. So should you. A pause. I don't much. He said it the way people say things that are true and also cost something small to admit. She pressed the phone against her ear. The apartment was dark, except for the light above the stove, which she always left on. The city hummed outside. She had been building toward a question for days now, carrying it through every phone call and text exchange, setting it down and picking it up again. She asked it, "Why are you doing this?" The silence before his answer was longer than any pause she had heard from him before. Not hesitation, something more careful than that, like he was reaching for the most honest version. He said finally, "Because I was in that room. I saw your face." A beat, quiet and certain, "And I don't leave things unfinished." He knew it wasn't the complete answer. He knew. Neither of them moved toward that edge. Instead, they stayed on the line, not talking, just present in the particular silence of two people who had been building something carefully, without blueprints, without deciding to. Outside, the city hummed on. Inside, something settled.
The hearing room was smaller than she expected. Maya had built it up in her mind over 3 weeks into something large and formal and designed to intimidate. What she got was a rectangular room with fluorescent lighting, a long table, 4 people on the labor board sitting with folders in front of them, and the particular stillness of a space where difficult things get decided quietly. She sat beside Park in a navy blazer she had bought specifically because she wanted to feel like something solid. Her hands were flat on the table. Her face was composed in the careful way she had learned early. Not cold, just controlled. The way you learn to look when you know the room will use visible feeling against you. Antonio's legal team was already seated when they arrived. Gerald Fitch, the same voice from the phone call, now with a face attached, expensive suit, the relaxed posture of a man who had done this many times and expected the same outcome. Dre went first. He was in a collared shirt that looked recently ironed, and his hands were not quite steady when he sat down. He spoke slowly at first, choosing each word like he was checking the ground before stepping on it. His voice shook once on the second sentence, and then something in him settled and it didn't shake again. He said what he saw, clearly, completely, in order. Fitch's cross-examination tried to establish uncertainty, whether the lighting was good enough, whether he had been close enough, whether perhaps he had misread the situation. Dre answered each question with the same steady patience. He had been 4 feet away. The lighting above that section of the floor was fully operational. He had not misread anything. Celeste appeared on screen from Portland, her video connection clear and her account precise. She described what Antonio had done to her in her 3rd month at Carmine's, the complaint she had filed, and the performance review that appeared in her file 6 days later, the first negative review of her employment. She had left 4 months after that. Roy sat 2 seats down from Maya and spoke without notes. He was a large, quiet man who chose his words sparingly and landed every one of them. He described the incident, the silence that followed it institutionally, and the morning he decided that leaving was cheaper than staying. Then Park stood up. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't perform, she simply took Antonio's counter-narrative, the claims of insubordination, the suggestions of a pattern of conflict, the carefully assembled picture of Maya as a difficult employee, and dismantled it piece by piece with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been waiting for exactly this room, exactly this case, exactly this moment to use everything she had prepared. By the time she sat down, Gerald Fitch's relaxed posture had changed into something more careful. The board took 40 minutes. The ruling came back in 3 parts. Maya was owed full back wages for the hours removed from her schedule following the incident. Reinstatement was recommended with immediate effect. Antonio's employment at Carmine's was suspended pending a full workplace investigation into his conduct across his 7 years as floor manager. It was not everything. Maya knew that. It wouldn't fix what it represented. The women before her who had no hearing, the complaints that were still sitting in restaurant filing cabinets across the city going nowhere. She had said this to Honeywell on the phone at midnight, and she still believed it. But it was real. It was documented. It had her name on it. Park squeezed her arm once, briefly, as they walked out. In the corridor, Bree pulled her into a hug that compressed her spine. Roy nodded at her on his way to the elevator. Dre caught her eye across the room, and she mouthed, "Thank you," and he nodded once, quickly, like he didn't want to make a thing of it.
Outside, the afternoon light hit the pavement at a low angle. Maya stopped on the front steps and looked across the street. The coffee shop had large windows facing the building. In the leftmost panel, a figure stood with a cup in one hand and his phone in the other, dark jacket, completely still, looking directly at her through 4 lanes of traffic and a pane of glass. She raised her hand. Barely. Just enough. Across the street, he raised his. She stood there for one more moment, the city moving around her, the ruling real and documented, and hers. Then she walked toward the crossing. The coffee shop was warm and slightly too loud. He was at the corner table, the same one from the morning at the diner, she noticed. Corner tables, always a wall behind him, always the full room in front. She understood that now in a way she hadn't at the beginning. He stood when she walked in. Not a performance, something quicker than that, like a reflex his body completed before his mind could calculate how it would look. She had noticed him do this before. It did something different to her each time. She sat down across from him. Neither of them spoke immediately. The noise of the shop wrapped around them, and for a moment that was enough. Just 2 people on the same side of something that had finally landed. "You watched the whole hearing," she said. "Yes." "From the window?" "You asked me to stay nearby." She looked at him, really looked, the way she had been careful not to in Park's conference room, in the diner, on all the phone calls where she could control how much she let in. He looked different in the afternoon light, without a crisis between them, still composed, still carrying that particular quality of stillness, but something underneath it was less guarded than usual. "I know what you are," she said. "I've known since the 3rd day. I know you have. I'm not saying it as an accusation. I'm saying it because we're not doing this," she gestured at the space between them, "with things left unacknowledged." He held her gaze. Something in his jaw shifted. "Then ask me what you want to know." So she did. He answered without deflecting. He told her he had come to this country at 22 with a specific kind of anger, the kind that builds in people who watch their community be overlooked and underpaid and quietly stepped on by systems that assume they won't push back. He had pushed back. The methods he had chosen existed outside the law, and he had never pretended otherwise, not to himself, not to the people who worked with him. He told her there were versions of what he did that he could justify, and versions he couldn't. He told her he had stopped pretending he didn't know the difference a long time ago. She listened the way she listened to everyone, not just to the words, but to what lived underneath them. What she heard underneath Hanyul Jang was a man who had been powerful for a long time and alone in it for just as long, who had built walls with the same hands he used to build everything else and had gotten very good at maintaining them, until a Friday night at a restaurant when something made him stay an hour past the point of leaving. She didn't say any of that out loud. She didn't need to. He could see her listening the way she listened, and she could see that it was doing something to him he wasn't entirely prepared for. Dinner was a week later. She chose the restaurant, small, warm, no performance required from either of them. He arrived exactly on time. They talked the way the phone calls had always moved, easy and real, 2 people who had already skipped the shallow part without planning to. When the evening ended, it didn't end, not for a long time. Later, in the quiet of his apartment, all clean lines and careful absence of anything personal, like a man who had never quite let himself settle anywhere, she lay looking at the ceiling and listened to the city outside. His apartment felt like him, controlled on the surface, something warmer underneath that hadn't been given much room. She thought about Antonio's hand on her arm, the grab, the way it had moved through her body like a current of wrongness she still hadn't fully discharged. And then she thought about tonight, about the difference between being seized and being held, and about how that distinction lived not just in the mind, but in the shoulders, the chest, the breath. It lived in her whole body, the difference. "I'm still not sure about this," she said to the ceiling. A pause, then his voice, low and honest, close. "Neither am I." She had expected reassurance, a promise, the kind of thing people say to close the distance between fear and commitment. What he gave her instead was the truth. She found it more comforting than any promise would have been.
Antonio's termination was announced on a Tuesday. The labor board's full investigation had taken 6 weeks and found what Park had always known it would find: a pattern, documented and undeniable, stretching back 5 years. 3 other former Carmine's employees came forward during the process, women whose complaints had been filed and buried and filed again into silence. The restaurant's ownership settled with all 4 of them, Maya included, for amounts that were meaningful and private, and accompanied by a public statement that Park had negotiated word by word. The national coverage ran for a week: food industry publications, workplace rights outlets, 2 television segments. The story moved the way stories move when they are about something bigger than one restaurant and one manager, because everyone who read it knew a Carmine's. Everyone had worked with an Antonio or been in the room when someone like him decided the rules didn't apply to him. Maya gave one interview. She sat straight, hands still on the table in front of her, voice unhurried. She said that the settlement was real and she was grateful, and it did not fix what it represented. Then she said exactly what still needed to change: in restaurant culture, in the way complaints were processed, in the institutional habit of protecting managers at the expense of the staff they were supposed to lead. She said it carefully and specifically and without asking anyone's permission. She said it the way a woman speaks when she has decided that being clear matters more than being comfortable. Hanyul watched the interview from a hotel room in Tokyo. He was there managing something that had required his physical presence, and which he was now managing considerably faster than he had ever managed anything, because he had a return flight in 5 days and had already moved it to 3. He watched Maya on his laptop screen, the stillness of her hands, the precision of her words, the way she held the room's attention without performing for it, and felt something in his chest that he had no efficient language for. He texted her, "You were extraordinary." Her response came back quickly, "You're biased." He smiled at his phone in an empty hotel room in Tokyo, which was not something he did often. "Come to Seoul with me." A pause, then, "Ask me again when you're home." He was home in 3 days. He had planned to ask her properly. He had something considered in mind, the right setting, the right moment, something that matched the way she moved through the world, measured and true. None of it survived the arrivals hall. She was standing just past the barrier in a green dress with her hair loose around her shoulders, the first time he had seen it down, fully down, without the ponytail or the professional pin, and every measured thing he had prepared evaporated completely. "Come to Seoul with me," he said. "Right there, International Terminal, crowds moving past them like weather." She laughed. The real one, the laugh that had no performance in it, the one that broke out of her entirely without permission. He had been collecting versions of that laugh since a parking lot and a grocery receipt, and a phone call she almost didn't answer. "You already asked me. You said when I'm home. You've been home for 40 seconds. "Yes." He stepped closer. The crowds moved around them, ordinary and oblivious. Maya. Just her name, but the way he said it, low and certain, like something he had come back across an ocean for. She looked at him, all of it present in the space between them, the diner at 6 in the morning, the phone calls after midnight, the coffee shop window, the ceiling, the truth he had given her instead of promises. "Seoul," she said. "Yes." She held up one finger. "But we negotiate everything else." His face opened, that expression she had been collecting alongside the laugh, the warmth underneath the architecture, wide and real and entirely his. She took his hand. He lifted it to his mouth, unhurried and certain, lips against her knuckles, and the airport arranged itself around them like it had always been going to. 6 months later, in a room full of people who loved them, she signed her name beside his. Bree cried loudly and denied it.
Park sat in the front row with her reading glasses on and the expression of someone who had always known how this particular case would conclude. Afterward, he found her at the window, always the city spreading out beyond the glass, holding all its ordinary noise and crisis and life. He stood behind her, arms around her, chin against her temple. "This started," she said, "because a man grabbed my arm in a restaurant." "No." His voice was quiet against her hair. She turned in his arms, looked at him with the full clarity of a woman who had earned every inch of where she was standing. "We," she said. He smiled, wide and real and entirely his. "We." And outside, the city breathed on, and inside, between two people who had found each other in the wreckage of someone else's cruelty, something permanent settled into place. Simple, solid, theirs.